Neen started out by just laughing her face off at the beginning of the video. So, hey, we do what we got to do because we're live, I think. So, hey, everyone.
No, I believe we are already live, and you haven't even danced yet. So,
all right. So, I'll dance. We'll start. There we go. Little dance. Yep. Do a little dance, make a little love. Yeah, I'm with David Burkus today, folks. So, David does requests. So, he says what he wants, and then I dance. So, that's how this works. And if you're watching this, oh boy, you're in for a good show. So David and I were talking on the green screen. I think this is the third or fourth time because I've got intellectual ADHD. I don't pick one path and go towards it. I just kind of do what's fun for me. And David, you went from an HR book to a networking book. So you're kind of doing the same thing, dude. What's up with that?
Yeah, well, a creativity book to a fancy marketing term will actually call it a leadership book. How's that? Right.
Leadership.
Right. And then and now a networking book. Really, I mean, really it's a combination of two things. The one through line through all of my work is that I'm trying to take good evidence-based, steeped in social science insights that hang out in the ivory tower. And I'm trying to figure out how to put handles on them, turn them into tools, and hand them to people in the corner office or the coffee shop or the co-working space, wherever they're doing their work, to make the work a little bit better, right? And so networking was one of those areas too, where there's a ton of advice. Basically, none of it is based in science. Where you do hear studies, they're usually misrepresented, right? And come at it from a little bit different angle. I mean, I think the fundamental problem of networking, to me, stems in this idea, the language we use. We say things like build a network or grow a network, et cetera. You can't have a network. You exist inside of one. And the best thing you can do, I mean, not unlike yourself and what I see with you, the best thing you can do is just go, okay, well, cool. This is the community. This is the network. How do I contribute to it? Right? And how do I make it better? And eventually that spills over into value for you. But like the other approach where you're just thinking it's a Rolodex that you're adding cards to. I don't know if anyone still uses a Rolodex. That'd be really cool. Or an app that you're adding new entries to on your phone. Like that's a faulty, flawed idea. It's really just about realizing you're already in one and figuring out how to act accordingly. So yeah, it might be intellectual ADHD, but it works. It's really anywhere where I see a need to bridge that gap between science and practice, then we attack that.
So first, I love that you said we exist inside of a network. It's already there, whether or not we choose it or not, right? I think we can choose though where to pop ourselves, right? Which network to belong to. Do you agree there, or am I off base?
Yeah, well, so now we get really nerdy and we have to define what we mean, right? So truthfully, there are 7.4 billion people on the planet and counting. And they would count as a network. They're all one massive network. And then that network has nooks and crannies and clusters. And usually when we say, sort of the network or the community, we're referring to like a branch of it. So yes. And for most of us, we don't choose where to be. We just let that kind of happen organically. We get this job and that connects us to these people. And we're told for work, we have to go to this conference and then we meet these people. And it becomes sort of where we are in that network just kind of happens naturally. And I think I mean, if anything, the networking advice books got right, it's the idea that you need to be intentional about what you're doing, because I think you do need to choose which network do I want to be a part of? Where do I want to be inside of it? And who do I want to be connected to, et cetera? These are all intentional things. I just think don't be intentional about growing your network because it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you, but be intentional about where you are in the network you choose to be in.
I like that. Good distinction. Good distinction. Makes a lot of sense. So I have to tell you, when I first, the first chapter of your book, you basically said all the networking stuff that we've read is BS. And I have to tell you, David, I've written some of that networking BS. So I want to hear more about that, because I'm going to reserve judgment, and I'm going to encourage people here listening that if you're thinking, well, David's just some smart intellectual guy that did the science, but this doesn't work in practice. David, talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know that I'd go as far as saying it's BS. I don't think it's BS. I think the problem is that it's autobiographical. Right? Which means that every networking advice, including your advice, right? And including my advice, like I'm really careful when people go, well, how would you do this? And if I don't have data for it, I'll go, okay, just so you know, I'm leaving that ranch and I'm speaking from personal experience, right? But if I do have data, then I'd rather go to that. See, the problem with advice is that it's autobiographical and you're a sample size of one, right? And your story is valuable. People need to hear your story, or Keith Ferrazzi's story is incredible, right? Dale Carnegie's story from almost 100 years ago is great. All of those stories are great, but they're a sample size of one. They only really provide value if you can take them and compare them to other ones, right? And have multiple different stories and look at the commonalities and then the things that are different. We call that research. We call that science, right? And we can have a sample size bigger than one. In psychology, which is my background, you wouldn't even consider a study unless the sample size was like 200 or 300 people, hopefully more. In network science, we're talking the scale of thousands, right? So I'm trying to, it's not that individual advice is wrong. Most of the people we profile in the book are not network scientists. They're people who, like yourself, who are a sample size of one, whose story just inadvertently overlaps with where the science says we should go, right? And that's my belief, is just, I think most people take that advice, they try and apply it, then they feel inauthentic and sleazy, and no wonder, because you're trying to be someone else. I mean, Keith Ferrazzi, for example, is a great guy, but I'm not him. I can't be him. There's lessons I can learn from his life, but I can't just do verbatim what he says to do. And I think that's the problem a lot of people have when they read these kind of books or the blog posts about how to introduce people, what have you, that you're pretending to be someone else. The better approach is to go, all right, what is universally true about all networks? And then how can I do something that leverages those principles but is authentic to me? That's what matters.
Universal truths about networking, David. Really? There's some universal truths? Come on, man.
Yeah, well, so there's no, I mean, I will say it's not like physics, or it is like physics. There is no grand unified theory yet. But there are certain phenomenon that exist in every single network. And what I mean by that is people networks, electronic networks, like electrical grids, computer networks, ecologies. There are certain discoveries, we could call them, or phenomenon that are universally true. And I know this because these are how I broke up all the chapters. Here's this principle that we know happens in all networks, and then here's what it means for you, right? So yes, there are certain things that are true of all networks.
So like what? Give me a for instance. What do you explain that?
So, I mean, probably the one most people are familiar with, right, is the idea of 6 degrees of separation, right? Or maybe you played the game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, right?
Yep, that's right.
It's a good game. There's an element of truth to it, and then there's a lie to 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. The element of truth is that the way that networks work, especially because of people in a transition, right? So you move jobs, you move geographies, you change the community that you're speaking to, what have you. Because of those people. Hi, Becky. I totally just saw your comment. I can't see it, but I know from your profile picture, you just posted something. Phil can probably see what it is. She just says hi. All right. So there's an interesting connection, right? You and I both know Becky, so we're already 1 degree of separation like that. Oh, now it popped up right on the screen. This is cool. Sorry, if you can't tell, by the way, this is my first time using Be Live. It's pretty cool. All right. 6 degrees of separation. So because of those changes, we are actually interconnected. So 7.4 billion people strong and counting. Most of the studies suggest that we are between 5 and 6 introductions away from everybody else. And in fact, if you're watching this, you're watching it because you have a Facebook account. If you have a Facebook account, you're actually only 4 introductions away from anybody else who has a Facebook account, which is a little crazy, right? So that's the truth element to it. Now, here's the lie. Kevin Bacon is not the center of the universe. So they actually replicated sort of 6 degrees inside of Hollywood. They did a whole study using IMDb and found who is you can get to from any actor or actress to any other actor or actress, but you don't have to go through Kevin Bacon. And in fact, if we ranked the most connected people in Hollywood, he is 669th. In other words, he's average. Right. So the way that I like to think about it is if you want to get more interconnected to your community, you don't need to have Kevin Bacon's network to be connected like Kevin Bacon, because Kevin Bacon doesn't even have Kevin Bacon's network, which is really confusing, but it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You don't actually need that connections because we're all sort of interconnected like that, interdependent. The term that we use in network science is that the network is resilient. It could survive 1 or 2 people disappearing because everybody is so strongly connected to that.
Dude, you are crushing my dreams.
I'm sorry.
Kevin Bacon is not the center of the universe.
No, and neither are you, and neither am I. And And that's really, really good news, because it means that pretty much any of us, if we apply it right and we're regularly exploring the fringes of who we know and who else is out there in the network, pretty much any of us can get connected to the people that we need to advance our career.
Cool. No, that is good news. So I actually read a study, and it could have been a sample size of 7. I'm not really sure, but it said like we're actually less than 2 degrees away from people. So you're telling me that the right research is 4 degrees.
Well, all right. Can I get super nerdy for a second?
You always will. Go for it.
Yeah, that's true. I'm already super nerdy, so we might as well just lean into it. So it depends on the methodology. And this is actually a really interesting implication. So there's a problem in network science we call search in network science, meaning how do you find a path, right? Most of the studies that show 5 to 6 degrees of separation were conducted this way. You recruit a bunch of volunteers, and then you pick a person. The very first study, Stanley Milgram's, was a stockbroker in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And you tell all those people, get this message to that person. If you don't know that person, send it to the next person you think could help pass the message along. And then of the connections that were made, the messages that were received, they were on average between 5 and 6 connections, right? So then that's one methodology. The way Facebook did it when it was 3 to 4, they looked at the just big data, looked at the whole grid, who's connected to who, and used an algorithm to find the most efficient path. So a computer can find the most efficient path, and in some networks, it might even be 2 to 3 instead of 4, right? What we as people usually do is not optimal, right? We don't have the ability to see this big data the way that a Facebook algorithm can. So we don't see that, right? Now, here's the cool lesson for all of us in this, right? Is that if you think you need to know a certain person, you need to get connected to a certain person, you're probably wrong. The likelihood that out of the 7.4 billion people on the planet, that one that you've identified as the one that will accelerate your career, probably not actually accurate. But if you need to know people in a certain industry, it's still better not saying, all right, well, this is my optimal path. I'm going to go beg this person for an introduction. It's better to start asking people, who do you know in blank, with blank being whatever industry you want to get into. So Phil, you want to meet Kevin Bacon. You need to be asking people, who do you know in film and television, right? You're going to get, usually you're going to get a list. Usually you're going to get a list of multiple people that other person would be willing to introduce you to if you asked, right? And then especially where that list has the same name on multiple people's lists, that's a really strong indicator that that's who you actually need to get connected to. So you solve that problem of search, and you become a little bit more like the algorithm, like the more efficient methodology. If you don't have a dedicated target in mind, you have an open mind, you start asking questions like, who do you know in blank?
So when are you going to introduce me to Kevin Bacon?
I don't know Kevin Bacon yet. I'm still trying to find a connection to him. Just the other day, though, I was chatting up a guy who worked for National Geographic as a producer. So that's TV. And now I need to get from TV to film, and then I can get to Kevin Bacon.
Awesome. So he'll be on the show next week, actually. So I'll make the intro. No, he won't. I'm just kidding. But that would be funny if it was, right?
It would be pretty cool. I'm actually debating whether or not I want to send him a copy of the book with like that page earmarked, or whether or not I want to wait for like word to get back to him, right? And then have him reach out to me. I'm not sure which one I want to do yet.
I bet we have some mutual friends who really do know Kevin Bacon, who've spoken on the same stage, or who've been at a conference, or been in film, right? Because he's also, didn't he speak at Content Marketing World a couple years ago?
I have no idea, but maybe.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Just something to think about. So
I'll give Kevin credit, right? So this whole thing, by the way, he got into this because 3 probably inebriated college students were watching a movie marathon and saw that he was in lots of different movies, right? Like actually in 2018, it's not even Kevin Bacon anymore. It's Samuel L. Jackson, right? But they just seemed like he was the one in all of these movies. So they started the 6 Degrees thing. And again, it's a total fluke of history, but he was the name that got identified. He's been a really good sport about it. He even started a charity called 6 Degrees that seeks to pair celebrities with lesser known, but maybe local charities. Because everybody, it's really easy to be a spokesman for the United Way. It's really hard to be a spokesman for the Greater Cleveland SPCA. They need a celebrity spokesman person too, but it's hard to get connected. And so Kevin's charity actually tries to connect these people with that, which is honestly a really good way to deal with being suddenly this person that everyone thinks is the center of the universe.
Awesome. Well, Lisa Demi says, Kevin Bacon, no! And Lisa, the answer is yes. That's the only question I got for you. And then Becky Robinson says we could tweet Kevin Bacon. So Becky, you should tweet this interview at Kevin Bacon and see if he's, going to watch it. Because if he is, I probably know somebody that could get him on the show. I'm just saying. I'm not sure, but maybe David, could you make an introduction for Kevin?
I don't know him. We could tweet at him. I personally, I'm not the type of person that just randomly tweets at celebrities. That doesn't seem to go well. Nowadays, it usually seems like a way to get the Twitter mob to get sicked on you. And I'm just, trying to avoid that.
Probably a good move. So LinkedIn though, right? Isn't LinkedIn built on this whole 6 degrees model? Doesn't this help you do that?
Yeah. So this is actually really interesting. And in fact, LinkedIn bought patents from an original social network called 6 Degrees that was trying to do that. And you sign into LinkedIn and you see, what's the level of connection between you and someone else. And it's a useful thing to know. I think the problem happens. So you get these people that think the goal is just to run up their LinkedIn count as much as possible. These people that like literally in their like about me, it brags about how they have 100,000 plus connections. Right. No, I'm the exact same way. And between those and like the real estate agents that I get connected to, and then suddenly they add me to their email list, like there's a lot of people using LinkedIn wrong. But the problem with those 100,000 connection plus people is that those are not legit connections. And then suddenly you're 2 degrees of separation away from everybody in this algorithm, even though it's usually not an authentic way to make that introduction, right? So again, and then like you're researching that certain person, then you see this connection, and then there are those people that will beg you for an introduction because they saw that you're connected on LinkedIn. It's weird and it's sort of awkward. And what, even though it's a good digital replication of this 6 Degrees idea, most of the research is strongly suggestive that the best use for online tools is as a way to supplement your existing offline relationships. It's not a replacement for. And so I still think it's a better approach to be asking face-to-face, or even if you use a digital tool, asking people offline, who do you know in blank, and then let the names come organically instead of like LinkedIn stalking a certain person and then trying to backtrack to how you can get connected to him or her.
Cool. That makes sense. And hey, we just found out that Kevin went to Lisa Demi's charity in Tampa on the Give Day for Tampa about 5 years ago. So David, we are now just 2 degrees.
We're like 2 degrees away. I know.
We're like almost married. That's good. So, and then Kevin Farashi O'Malley is excited that he just got the newest bestseller in his library, Friend of a Friend. So congratulations, Kevin. We're excited about that. And Kevin,
you rock. Send me a picture of the book too arriving, because it's really cool to see it. I got like a bazillion copies, so I'm bored of these, but I like to see how other people are reading it, where it popped up, etc. So yeah, send me a picture, please.
Awesome. Yeah. And Kevin says 100,000 connections. Once upon a time, we called it the white pages of the phone book. Let's focus on real connections. Kevin, you are great at that. Thank you for chiming in. Totally agree. So David, what's one other maybe this didn't surprise you, but what was something in your book that was like, is this really true? And then when you did the more research, it was even more apparent.
Yeah. So probably one of the best examples to share is there's this term in both network science and in the advice books called the super connector, right? There's a lot of people throwing out this term. Some people attribute it to Keith Ferrazzi, some attribute it to Gladwell, although Gladwell just called them connectors in the Tipping Point, right? You had connectors, mavens, and something else. But it's in those sort of books. It's also a term in network science. And what it describes are the people that have a disproportionate number of connections, legit connections, not the 100,000 plus LinkedIn connections, but legit connections. We tend to think, like we look at like Dunbar's number of 150, and we tend to think that implies whether you have 150 or more, that implies there's some kind of average, like there's an inverted U, and some people have a little bit more than average and some people have a little bit less, but everybody can only have around a certain number of connections. And it's not actually true. If you were to chart, if you think about everybody you know, and then you were to ask them how many connections you have, how many people you have, we do a couple different ways that we do this. But you can come up with a number, and it actually looks a bit more like a power law or a Pareto principle, like an 80-20 rule. There are certain people that really skew the curve and have a disproportionate number. So why I bring this up, right, is that I think for a lot of people, this idea of making connections, making authentic, real connections, growing the number of people they know or moving where they are in the network, it seems like it comes naturally to some people. Right. And this isn't the introversion, extroversion debate. We can debunk that a little bit later, too, if you want. But just this idea that like, oh, so-and-so's always getting invited to things and they're always getting introduced to new people, et cetera. Well, there really is a network science principle that explains this. So once you start moving up that curve and you are that sort of super connector, there's this principle called preferential attachment. It's a fancy way of basically saying that the more connected people in a community, in a network, are more likely to get new introductions to new people. Those who have are likely to get more, right? And those who lack, even that will be taken away. It's a Matthew effect. I think of it a lot of times like gravitational pull. You get to a certain critical mass and then it gets easier for new things to be pulled in towards that center. Now, that's good news and bad news. The bad news is that it really is easier for those people who look like it just comes easier to them, right? And also, to some extent, the bad news is once you hit up that curve, you might actually have to pay more attention to like pruning connections than just being connected to everyone. My friend Jason Gaynard uses this term that like his key to a good network is subtraction, not addition. Well, that's because he's been an amazing networker for like 10 years and he's always getting introduced to new people, right? Most of us, that's not our problem. Most of us, our problem is getting up the curve. The good news is that if preferential attachment is true, and it appears to be true for all networks, if that's true, then it gets easier over time. You put in the work and the work starts building like gravitational mass, right? It starts to get easier. And so eventually you start working your way up that curve. It gets easier over time and eventually it runs on autopilot, right? So yes, it does seem like it comes easier to some people. It can also come easier to you if you're willing to put in the work over time, right? There's a term in network science called social capital, the value of the network, the value of where you are in that network, et cetera. Capital runs on an investment principle. You have to make more and more investments in and let compound interest take over before you can make a massive withdrawal.
That makes so much sense. And it's nice that science proves that out, because I certainly agree that that is so important. We have to understand that, and putting in the work is something that a lot of people miss. David, to your point that you said earlier, right? Just getting introduced to Brian Fanzo is not going to make you famous, right? That might make you popular, but it isn't going to make you famous, isn't going to connect. And Brian's here, he says, scaling at the super connector level seems to be about focus and eliminating, which seems backwards, but he 100% agrees. So good that Brian also agrees with math.
There you go. Yeah, no, I mean, it depends on what you want. I think a lot of the elimination just comes from, okay, you've gone up the curve and now new introductions are happening on autopilot. So you don't have to focus on making new connections. Now what you have to focus on is just investing, having enough time to invest in the right connections. So you are eliminating, but you only get to that point because new introductions coming in are sort of happening on autopilot so that you don't have to worry about that. The great problem to have, it's not the problem 90% of us have.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So you mentioned introversion versus extroversion. So extroversion, right? Those are the super connectors, right, David?
Yeah. Or they're the really obnoxious people that are always pressing business cards in your hand.
Don't point at me that way. That's not nice. Come on now.
So one of the most common refrains I get, and I didn't want to put it in the title or the subtitle that this is a book of networking for introverts, but it has good news for introverts in it. One of the most common refrains that you hear about networking is like, oh, I just can't do that because I'm an introvert. Well, okay, if we're defining networking solely as going to that cocktail party where everyone knows they're supposed to be talking to each other, but isn't, they're just standing in the corner stirring their drink, right? It just feels like an 8th grade dance all over again. No one's actually interacting. If that's what you're defining as networking, then yeah, you're probably bad at that, right? But if we're defining it as knowing where you are in the network, knowing who's a friend of a friend, who's connected to whom, there's actually some evidence that introverts might be better at this. So in network science, there's a principle called multiplexity. It's a really fun SAT word. Multiplexity basically means the number of contexts for connections that you have with people. So if you only know each other through one thing, like you work together, that's a uniplex tie. But if you have a couple different reasons to connect, you work together, turns out you go to the same gym, and you both love the Philadelphia Eagles, right? There's multiple different reasons for connection, right? One of the things you hear from a lot of introverts, the reason they hate these events, et cetera, is they just loathe small talk. Well, small talk, that superficial talk about the weather and whatever, and so what do you do, and let's hear your elevator pitch, those kind of things, those will build uniplex ties, not multiplex ties. The introverts are actually the ones that want to they're going to talk to less people, but the conversation is going to be deeper. And because of that, you're going to build multiplex connections and have a stronger connection by the end of it. So, I mean, I actually believe that if we're using networking as taking care of the whole network, knowing where you are in it, the introverts are better at it. They're naturally better at it because they want to have that deeper, more personal relationship than the extroverts who want to sort of work the room and be friends with everybody. It's cool to be friends with everybody, but like you're not going to build as deep a relationship with the few if you're focused on the many. Turns out the few, I mean, to Brian Fenzo's point of what he's thinking, I think with elimination, the few is kind of what matters in the long term.
Very good. Well, I always thought multiplexity was what the British Bulldogs did in the WWF.
No, that's a suplex.
Yeah. So close.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Awesome shout out to the British Bulldogs, plural, the tag team. Most people only remember Davey Boy Smith. So well done there.
You can't forget about the Dynamite Kid. I mean, they were the tag champions for a while there, David.
Yeah, no, they were. And then I think later, because basically the Hart Foundation ruined the whole thing because Davey Boy Smith just became part of the Hart Foundation because he married somebody or whatever. But yeah,
gets in the way. So no suplexing and networking, all about multiplexity. Good distinction, David. Appreciate that. So for those of you listening here, David and I can go back and forth all day about wrestling. So if you're looking for that,
that's not. So I will say we could go back and forth all day about wrestling until about 1999, and then I stopped.
Well, that's back when it was real, David.
Late 80s, early 90s. For like WrestleMania 10 is probably the pinnacle of my existence. Maybe 9 was 9. 9 was where I think he Bret Hart beat. 10 is where he beat Yokozuna. 9 is where. When did Hulk Hogan actually like pick up Andre the Giant and Slam? That was like 3.
Oh, that was 4. 3 or 4.
Was it 4? Yeah. Okay, yeah, it was somewhere in there. So like from there until about 1999. Yeah.
So Doink the Clown or the Junkyard Dog.
Well, the thing with Doink is that he had all of those other little clowns. So you could never really beat him because there was sort of someone else, right? So yeah, so maybe Doink. I will tell you in the Monday Night Raw Sega game, Doink the Clown was a really underrated guy to play. He really was.
Awesome. So cool. So as we digress here, talking about networking though, and I'm serious about this, is talking about wrestling. Is that single plexing? Or is that more multi?
No, I mean, so now, I mean, I think we ended up talking about wrestling the last time we did this too, which is really fun.
Yeah.
This is a really good example of building sort of a multiplex tie, right? Most of us don't do this. Like we're trained, like the number one question when you meet someone is what?
What do you do, David?
What do you do, right? It's a fair question, but it's a giant signal that I only want to talk about work, right? And that's fine, but like, especially if you're at a conference or you're like a work function, the conversation is going to get to work. So you might as well take a couple stabs at deliberately trying to reach out to something else, right? Usually it's really hard to run around with the wrestling one because that's a very small sort of niche community. But I will often ask people like, who's your favorite superhero? Because everybody's got one, even if all they do is go to the Marvel movies, right? Everybody's got one that they can point to. And you can learn a lot from who they picked. Right. So that's a good question. Or I'll ask people, what excites you right now, which is an open-ended question. You can go work or you can talk about something else. Right. There's a bunch of different things you can go. But that is sort of the key. It's probably not wrestling all the time. In fact, it's definitely not pro wrestling all of the time. But anything that encourages you as you're talking to that person to sort of branch out and find other reasons to connect. Humans are multifaceted creatures. We have multiple different, contexts to us. And so we need to be multifaceted with other humans in order to build that deeper connection.
Awesome. That's so good. So you've got your Captain America shirt on today, but I got to know. So have you seen Infinity War?
I have. We went opening night.
Awesome.
We weren't planning on it, but like there were 2 seats left in the theater and we thought, what the heck, let's do it.
Cool. So if we rewind though, Civil War, right? Were you on Captain America's side or Iron Man's side?
So here's the thing. I was probably on Cap or on Iron Man's side, but then you watch Infinity War, spoiler alert for anyone watching, Infinity War kind of switches everyone over to Captain America's side. They take sort of certain stances that does, like if you were an Iron Man side and you care about the rule of law and all that sort of stuff, like, you're wrong. Everyone was actually supposed to be on Cap's side. I'm not a big fan of that. But then again, like, I got to be honest, it's a 2.5 hour movie that could have been 7 minutes long. So, you know, it could have been from a sheer sort of plot standpoint, right? You could have done the whole thing in like 7 minutes.
Ouch. All right. That's enough vendor talk.
Sorry. So I'm not a fan of when people take something and split it into two just to sell me 2 tickets to it. I didn't like it at the last Harry Potter, the last Hunger Games. The whole idea of taking The Hobbit and making it 3 movies was ridiculous to me. I'm not a big fan of that.
That's okay. All right. So that's fine. So Ricardo Gonzalez is listening in today. Hey, Ricardo, thanks for joining us. And Becky says, happy anniversary, David, a day late. Is that right?
That's true. That is true. My anniversary was yesterday. It was also the launch of the book. So it was a pretty busy day. It was a little crazy. I will say, in total nerddom fashion, because of the book and whatever, we had a little bit of celebration yesterday, but our big celebration was last Friday when we could get a babysitter easier. And we went to go watch Infinity War for our anniversary.
Awesome. So David, if there's one more tip from the book is Friend of a Friend for those of you who don't have a copy yet, which launched yesterday. So you probably don't, although Kevin Farashi O'Malley already got it. So David's zooming in there. There it is. Friend of a Friend. Yep. He says he's got a bunch of them at home, and I bet he does. So David, what's one more tip from the book that you want to leave people with as we go here?
So probably the biggest next tip is, and this is especially in place for folks that are in leadership or management or have to make complex decisions. There's another $2 SAT word in the book that we call homophily, right? Love of same, like attracts like, etc. You know, most of us, it's 2018. Most of us know that we need a diverse set of perspectives, pouring into us so we can make good decisions. And we're talking, you know, ethnic diversity, gender diversity, racial diversity, ideological diversity, age diversity. We need all of it, right? The problem is that networks actually have a sort of built-in homophily effect, right? So you're connected to certain people. The people you are closely connected to are naturally a little bit self-similar. You work in the same job. You probably have the same background. You're probably around the same age. And what happens over time is if you're only relying on your network to grow organically, if you're only allowing on sort of organic connections to the people that are with you, then those close-knit people are going to be your most common source of new connections. And therefore, those new connections are going to be more self-similar to you. So most of us know that we need more diversity in our collection of contacts, our network, but most of us struggle to actually get there because we're relying on just the people that are around us. So most of us, you probably need to do an audit, almost all of us do, of who are maybe the closest 24 people that you're connected to, and where do they stand, you know, on a variety of different things, diversity wise. So everything from the ones that we normally talk about, gender and race, ethnicity, but also ideological diversity, background diversity, et cetera. Where do they stand on it? And you're going to find that it's probably the minority of people that are actually different from you. And you need to make a deliberate effort to spend a disproportionate amount of time with them so that they are feel more comfortable speaking into your life, feel more comfortable introducing you to people, et cetera. It's a very deliberate action to grow that network to a more diverse one. If you allow it to just happen organically, you're probably going to get more of the same. Size doesn't solve it. Size just gives you more of the same. It takes a deliberate effort to grow it a little bit more.
Cool. So be intentional in your networking, be deliberate, have a plan, be strategic, and read a copy of Friend of a Friend by David Burkus. David, are there any bonuses people can get if they buy your book this week during launch?
Yeah, so there are. So we're doing a really cool thing. We've got a whole audio course on how to give and get introductions. So how do you work that 1 degree, 2 degree of separation thing based off of concepts in the book? There's a workbook. Like every chapter has exercises, and then we put up worksheets for all of that. I think I'll sign the book somehow, or send you a book plate so you can like slap it on the back of your Kindle, and I'll sign your Kindle if you bought the ebook, or your iPod. I would love to have my signature on the back of someone's iPod because they bought the audiobook. So all of that is there. Really, really easy. So you just buy it, right? Wherever you get your email confirmation, or if you bought it at like Barnes & Noble, snap a picture, send your receipt to preorder@davidburkus.com. It's technically not available for pre-order anymore because it's out, but we don't want to confuse things. So pre-order at davidburkus.com, and we'll send you those bonuses. As soon as we see the receipt, we'll kick it over. The system works really, really well. It's been kind of fun to see. So yeah, cool. That's definitely, and that's this week, probably till Friday or Saturday, because we eventually have to shut it down and focus on getting people all of those bonuses. I have to sign a bunch of book plates to mail them out. So yeah.
Wow, good stuff. So if you get it, just send it, as David said, pre-order at davidburkus.com. That's DavidBurkus.com. I'll leave that in the comments. But as we go here, folks, A Friend of a Friend is a great new book for you to get. I got an early copy to Kindle. David is a master pointing out the science, not just one person's idea about networking. So pick it up, get your copy, send in your pre-order by the end of the week. We'll say maybe the 5th, 6th, or 7th of May. And thanks, David Burkus, for being here, buddy. It's great to talk to you, as it always is. Thanks.
Hey, no, thank you so much. Always good to chat. I mean, real important stuff, and then also some stuff about networking. I mean, wait. Was the wrestling part the more important, or was it? I don't know.
I think it was.
It's up to you.
Yeah, for us, it usually is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to say, but whatever it is and wherever you are,